You're not overweight because of your genetics or your bad habits or your behaviors. You're overweight because you're addicted to dopamine. Every time you eat something that's ultra processed, sugary, or high in fats, your brain releases dopamine, which basically is capable of making you addicted to anything. But the good news is I'm going to show you exactly how to break free from this addiction and to make losing weight so much easier. If you're wondering how I know about this, my name is Ardi. I've lost over 25 kilograms, I've gotten lean, and I've been studying psychology for the past 5 years of my life, 2 years in college and 3 years in university. And I'm basically bringing in all of that information in order to help people lose weight much easier and much faster. So let's get straight into it. So dopamine is probably one of the biggest reasons why you haven't lost the weight yet. And that feeling of pleasure is a reward, which, as we talked about in the conditioning video, which I believe was 2 or 3 videos ago, it makes you want to achieve that same feeling of pleasure over and over and over again. So for example, whenever you eat highly palatable and tasty foods, you get a spike, or rather a surge of dopamine that reinforces that behavior of eating the food so that you want to continuously do it over and over again. Now that I told you this, we can move on to why you're probably cooked right now. As you eat more and more tasty foods, your body pretty much adapts to that level of dopamine that you get from those tasty foods, and this is inherently a process called habituation, and it's basically the extinguishing of an innate response, which in this case is dopamine secretion due to a repeated stimulus, which again is tasty foods. So for example, compare your first time doing literally anything versus the 100th time doing anything. So for example, first time, let's say you showed up to a university lecture, you're probably really nervous because you didn't know what was going on, versus your 100th time, you don't feel nervous anymore. You pretty much just rock up, do your thing and get out. It's pretty much just become second nature or a second habit. And this is the process of habituation. Your first time eating junk food or eating a tasty burger, that's probably not the same as if you had a burger right now. It would probably be your 100th or 1000th time. You wouldn't feel that same feeling of pleasure as you did for the first time. That's pretty much habituation. Now, the example I've got here is a baby calf, right? On the farm where a baby calf is raised, if it sees a car and the car honks, that baby calf has been programmed to get really scared of that car. This is because naturally and inherently, loud noises are bad. So babies get really scared of it. But then the thing is, as in time goes on and it learns that the loud noise isn't actually harmful, it just doesn't get scared of it anymore. This is the process of habituation. Now that adult cow is pretty much just on the fields and now is just watching the cars go by, no matter how loud the cars are. Now, in the same way as that, your body is insanely smart and adaptable to many different situations. Now, your brain can constantly adapt to the constant flood of dopamine, and it adapts by actually down-regulating the dopamine receptors, which basically means that it cuts down the amount of receptors available to bind to dopamine, which means you feel less dopamine, or in other words, your brain is less sensitive to dopamine overall because there's less receptors. Therefore, what this means is that you need way more dopamine because you have less receptors to get that same level of stimulation and feelings as before. Now, when this happens, this is pretty much your new level or your new baseline of dopamine that you need to feel, or that you are driven to feel every single day. It's pretty much like your brain's like a spoiled child which is used to just having everything that they want, which is exactly why they expect that in the future, because that's exactly what they've been given in the past before. And by far the easiest way to achieve this level of stimulation every single day is just to eat junk food. So which probably explains why you've been driven to eat junk food or constantly binge eat all the time. It's to reach this level of stimulation every single day that you've basically trained your brain to operate at. But you can also reach those high dopamine levels from other sources as well. For example, playing video games releases a lot of dopamine. If you've ever wondered why there's the stereotype of the fat gamer nerd, this is probably why. Because their dopamine baseline is so high overall that it spills over into all the other areas of their life. No disrespect to this dude, but that's probably why. It's because their overall dopamine stimulation and receptors are pretty much just fucked. So they seek to fulfill this stimulation in literally any way that they can. And I don't want you to think that I'm some dude that's above all of this. Literally, I've been in the trenches there too. When I was fat, I was literally addicted to video games and leveling up in those virtual video games. Literally, video games, anime, and food were the only things that I got dopamine or that I got pleasure from. And you can see me here at my heaviest. Like, what do you think this dude was doing for pleasure? Just eating junk food, watching anime, and playing video games. And to top it all off, engaging in these high dopaminergic activities actually reduces your ability to get pleasure from literally any other activity, like working out or eating clean. So that even if you do that, it just doesn't feel rewarding. And so what are the consequences of literally just being cooked? Well, you turn to junk food to stimulate your dopamine receptors, which then leads to your constant overeating and getting big backed. But this also means that all the other good habits like eating clean or going to the gym feel really dull and unrewarding compared to these high dopaminergic activities, which is pretty much why you haven't lost the weight before. Now the question remains, how do you know if you're one of these people whose dopamine is so fucked up? Let's move on to that right now. So the first symptom is that you have terminal boredom. You don't get the pleasure from doing normal people shit. For example, taking a walk, you feel bored. The gym feels too boring for you, or cooking meals is just tedious. You then feel the need for constant stimulation, and when you don't get it, you're pretty much like a crack addict. I've been there too. Like, I remember I used to just crave constant stimulation through my phone, that every single time that I got up, I would constantly be scrolling Instagram reels. And this literally, like, I used to be bumping into walls and people just because I was literally glued to my phone that much, just because I craved that stimulation. It's pretty much comparable to that Black Mirror episode where you see everyone's like social credits just above their head. I was pretty much that. If you can't find the little things fun, you're probably cooked. And if you are, it's not the end of the world, because I'm going to tell you how to reverse all of this being cookedness right at the end. Now, symptom number 2 is that you don't really want anything. You've lost sight of what you want and your goals. Your dopamine has been literally stimulated so much that the idea of achieving your goals, be it losing weight, getting good grades, or a promotion at your job, just doesn't release that much dopamine for you. So you'd rather just crawl back into your hole, play video games, and eat junk food in order to suppress all of your emotions. But then this leads into like a vicious feedback cycle, because the more out of shape you get, because let's face it, bro, you're living like a gremlin, the bigger the void inside of you gets, and the more dopamine you need to numb yourself from the pain caused by you not being who you want to be. That's a real mouthful of a sentence, but basically, the further away you get from the person that you want to be, the more incongruent you're going to feel. And the more incongruent you're going to feel, this is a concept in psychology, by the way, you're going to feel so much more negative emotions and anxiety and doubt. And this actually leads on to symptom number 3. This should say number 3. You're pretty much unmotivated. You don't want to do or you don't want to achieve anything. And consequently, you don't actually have the willpower or the motivation to start doing anything with your life. For example, you start a diet, but then you quit 3 days later on. You start learning how to box, but then you quit that as well. Literally everything that you do lacks motivation, or you lack willpower to do it. And this is pretty much because your brain has adapted to you and your levels of instant gratification. And pretty much whenever you start doing something, your brain automatically and unconsciously does a cross-benefit analysis. And what a cross-benefit analysis is basically just weighing up the pros and cons. Now, compared to the amount of perceived energy that you need to do instant gratification activities, like, let's face it, it doesn't actually require that much energy to eat that pizza off the counter, versus actually accomplishing something like going through a hard workout at the gym. That requires so much more energy. You need to get up off the couch, put your clothes on, go to the gym, actually hit the workout. So doing the good habits just feels like an enormous amount of energy is needed, because, like, compared to the instant gratification activities, an enormous amount of energy is actually needed. This means your dopamine levels are fucked if you feel like you lack the discipline or the energy to follow through with your plan, or you rely a lot on comfort or avoidance behaviors such as eating processed foods. So now that we've been through the symptoms of a person who has a messed up dopamine system, you might actually have fallen victim to this. But I'll be going exactly on how to reverse this right now. So let's go. How to fix your dopamine. Well, it's actually really simple, but it's not easy. And that is exactly the reason why 99% of the people watching this will never take action on it. But hopefully, that's not you. The way we fix your dopamine is by just reducing your dopamine intake. The way that we fix your dopamine is pretty much just reducing your dopamine intake. Like, that's literally it. Just like habituation, when you overload dopamine constantly, your brain gets adapted and used to it. But it also works the other way around. But the only downside is that it's not exactly fun as, stimulating your dopamine receptors constantly. So whenever you reduce your dopamine intakes from literally all sources, but most importantly, because this is a weight loss channel, I need you to quit junk food completely. When you cut out junk food, literally after 2 weeks, your brain genuinely forgets what it tastes like. And this naturally happens because humans are forgetful creatures. Like, I guarantee you, 1 hour after you watch this video, you're gonna forget what I said in this video. But that can actually work in your favor, because then when you get used to eating healthy foods again, that's not super tasty, such as beef mince, rice and vegetables, then after your brain has forgotten what junk food tastes like, all the healthy food starts tasting really good. For example, if you've been dining on pizza for the last week, this healthy meal is going to taste like shit, because compared to the pizza, it really does. But then if you get used to what normal healthy food tastes like, then that is just your new baseline, and the amount of dopamine that you get from that will just be normal again. And because your dopamine receptors are much more healthy and much less stimulated, this food won't actually control you anymore. You won't feel that need to go bingy or overeat on junk food. Now, this is exactly the reason why I don't have cheat meals for the clients in my program. Instead of just letting your brain just completely forget about junk food, if you constantly reintroduce it every single week or like every single Friday, you remind your brain constantly of exactly what it's missing out on. Now, if you don't have an addictive personality like me, you can get away with this. You can still lose weight whilst eating junk food. But chances are, that's not you, and that's definitely not me. We're fat in the first place because we got addicted to food way too easily. We've most likely got addictive personalities. And I'm not saying you can never have junk food ever again. Just save it until after you've lost the weight and you've changed your life. I swear to God, the people that feel sad about saying that they don't get any junk food on their diet, I want you to go have a look at yourself in the mirror right now. The way that you look right now, you're probably around 300 cheat meals deep, and you're saying you want more. If the way that you got fat was fundamentally imbalanced because you're in a calorie surplus, why do you think going forward being balanced is going to change that? If it was an unbalanced lifestyle that got you fat in the first place, it's only going to be an unbalanced life that's going to take you in the other direction. Food evolutionarily isn't meant to be a source of pleasure. It's genuinely just a source of staying alive. For example, for your caveman brains, it doesn't really matter if the mammoth meat is nicely salted or deep fried in oil. Cavemen are going to eat it cooked, or they're going to eat it raw because it keeps them alive. But all of these food companies have literally taken advantage of the mechanisms in our brain to keep us hooked. And I'm not saying that lightly. There's a video on this topic, the food palatability reward hypothesis, that's coming out soon, and it's going to be such a banger, so watch out for that. You need to shift your mindset from seeing food as a source of pleasure to now seeing it as a source of energy only. Does this suck? Yeah, big time. It's probably one of the worst things about being on a diet, but I'd rather have that every single day rather than be fat again. And hopefully you can sort of see how serious this is, and hopefully you give cutting out junk foods a good go. And like, quite literally, if you have watched this far, you're probably committed enough to cut junk food out for a couple of months. And just like any addiction, cutting out junk food and sugar is only hard for the first 2 weeks. Once you get through like the withdrawal symptoms, it gets so much easier and you actually start liking the healthy food so much more. So basically, that's it for this video. I really do hope you've learned something new from this and that you can take away something really useful for your own life. If you decide to try out the advice in this video, let me know how it goes in the comments. I do read every single one of them, so you have a 100% chance of your comment being read. If you want to get yourself a copy of this board so that you can keep it for yourself and personalize it to you, DM me on Instagram, adif.bufan. And the board, you can pretty much just copy this into your own app and you can play with it however you want. If you want to lose a bunch of weight and you want my personal help in doing so, feel free to scroll down and check out the link in the description. Now, you don't have to, it's not for everyone, but if you feel like you need an extra helping hand, then feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Peace.